Hi, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Onboard with Jonathan. I'm your host, Sam, and this is Jonathan.
Hey guys.
Jonathan, tell us a little bit about how the channel's going so far.
Yeah, the channel is doing well. We're getting some good views. I ask if you check out the last episode with me and Samantha. If you could take a chance to watch it, like it, share, subscribe to your fellow friends. I think there's some really good tips and tricks of the cruise trade in there, and I think you're going to get some really helpful information from watching that video. So please take a chance and take a look at it. It's really cool.
And while you're at it, go ahead and like this video, drop some comments on any of your feedback and any questions you want answered so we can use them in our future interviews together. So let's get started in today's topic. We have a very interesting topic that we discussed in our last interview, seasickness. And since I have a lot of questions about this, Jonathan and I have talked about it extensively. I thought we should discuss it today, and he thought this was a very important topic for those of you who are out here and experience the same issue. So, Jonathan, why don't you start us off by talking a little bit about how to book and also testing out whether or not you are going to experience seasickness and how to avoid that just with your booking?
Yeah, sure. So if we have, I think this channel, not really knowing a lot about who my subscribers are, but I think there's a good amount of people that have never taken a cruise, and that's really exciting, right? People who have never taken a cruise, this is the channel for you where you're going to kind of learn all about cruising and all the advice that I can give to you. So my advice for booking your first cruise, don't book a long cruise, right? Don't book a transatlantic, which basically transatlantic is from like London to Florida or London to New York. Long cruise where you'll be on the ocean for 8 or 9 days with no ports. Don't do a transatlantic. Don't do a South America cruise. Start off small, right? If we have people here in Florida, do a short cruise, right? Kind of test out your sea legs. A 3 or 4 day Bahama cruise where you'll pretty much be in port every day, right? You'll leave from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Port Canaveral, and you'll be in Nassau or one of the private islands. So you'll see land every day, right? And you'll get used to the movement on the ship. And depending on when you're cruising, don't cruise in hurricane season if you're susceptible to seasickness, right? Take a short cruise, go on a large ship. So large being a mega ship. So if everyone knows about Royal Caribbean, right? Royal Caribbean has some of the largest ships in the world, Oasis class. Those ships are huge. They're floating cities that can have up to 7,000 passengers and crew on it. So a short cruise, 4 or 5 nights, 3, 4 or 5 nights, test it out. Don't cruise in hurricane season. So hurricane season goes anywhere from, I believe it's the end of May all the way to November 30th. You can go during those times, but don't go in August or September. And some of October can be very rough. Samantha, I hope that answers our question to our viewers about seasickness on the first question.
Okay, so I'm definitely not going to do some large, very long,
Mm-hmm.
extensive cruise for my first one. Test it out, maybe a quick weekend getaway.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a great one. Just going to the Caribbean. I think that answers the question. So, next one, I'm very curious about. I know that there's a lot of different cabins, and now that we've talked more about it, in the beginning, I thought every single cabin was the same, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, they were all located in the same spot, had the same view. Tell us about which cabins might be a little bit better for those who do experience seasickness.
Yeah, so this will help you if you do get seasick and you're prone to seasickness. I highly recommend you look for a cabin on a low deck. So depending on how cruise ships start, they usually start depending on the cruise lines 1, 2, or 3, or 3, 4, and 5, depending on the various lines that there are. Book a cabin, say on 2 or 3, and middle of the ship. The middle of the ship has the least amount of motion. You'll get the most motion towards the front of the ship. If the ship is in heavy weather and the ship is in rough seas, you'll feel the movement of the ship pitching, which is, if that is around for me, I'm making my way back to the cabin because I cannot deal with the pitching of the ship. I could do the side to side, which is you'll get used to it. So avoid the front, which is in our sailors and nautical terms, which is the forward, FWD, the forward part of the ship, and avoid the aft, which is the back of the ship. So the AFT. You'll get a better ride in the back, but the forward is probably not going to be good for someone who's seasick. So midship cabins, low to the center of gravity on the ship. If I know people I go back and forth with people saying I need a high deck 15. I'm like, whoa, don't do that. Especially if you get seasick, you want to be low to the ship, and you'll get the least amount of movement, and you'll get the best ride. And just so you know, when you're about to book your cabin on the said ship, you'll get a diagram of the ship, and you'll see where the cabin is, and you'll know that you'll be paying a premium for midship cabins because cruise lines charge you a premium to be midship.
Okay. Wow. That's good to know. I didn't know all that, but we're going to test mine out by booking me really low for the first time. Next on the list, can you talk a little bit more? I'm assuming that there's probably some things like such as foods that you can eat that might help with your stomach settle a little bit, some that might cause seasickness to be a little bit more extreme. Also, how about, alcohol packages? A lot of people purchase those for cruises. Is that something that's a good idea, or should you avoid it if you have seasickness?
Yeah, that's a good question, Samantha. Yeah, if you're seasick, you should not be drinking alcohol. Hopefully, you can make up for the missed day of drinking on the next day that you're in port, or the next day when the ship is in better sea conditions. You should definitely not drink alcohol. You should avoid any fatty foods, so any like Italian food or pizza or any spicy food. You should apples work very well. Anything dry like toast, something that you could see that you can keep down, and limit. I would avoid actually any contact with alcohol. And you should basically try to get out of the cabin if you can. Go somewhere where you could stare at the horizon. If you're lucky enough to be in a balcony cabin, sit outside on the balcony, look outside, and try to, see. The best thing is to kind of distract your mind from it and see if your brain kind of like functions. Don't focus. Oh, it's a rough day out. Just see if you can partake in the various activities that are going on the ship and kind of keep your mind off of it. I try to do that now because I think I said in the first one of our first episodes, I in fact get seasick. Little story time here. Hopefully it won't be that long. Me and my mom, we went on our first, well, it wasn't my first cruise, it was my mom's first cruise. And I made the mistake of taking her on an Eastern Caribbean cruise from Fort Lauderdale to San Juan. And that is a long sail. It's a rather long sail. It's a day and a half at sea. So you leave Fort Lauderdale at 4:30 and you don't get into the following day at 4 or 5 o'clock at night. My mom and myself were seasick, and my mom was very sick, right? We were, we were green. And for someone who never experienced that before, seasickness can be really awful depending on how your body handles it. And my mom made the decision once she was so happy the ship got to Puerto Rico, we actually disembarked the ship in Puerto Rico. And that cruise, I had been on 3 or 4 cruises, and I was trying to convince her to say that we made it through the toughest part, the Atlantic Ocean, and we were going to go to islands. We were going to go to Dominican Republic, St. Thomas, and go to one other port, and then go back to Florida via the Caribbean Sea. So I was trying to convince her to be like, it's not going to be this way to going back. We made it through the hardest part, because we were sailing at a good clip for a day and a half, a fast speed of like 23 knots. And she decided to elect to get off the ship. So lesson learned, be careful on the itineraries that you book. But I have to say my mom's a real trooper. She did go on another cruise again, a year from that time, and she loved it. So that was bad on me that I picked an Eastern Caribbean cruise for her first cruise. And we spent New Year's Eve in San Juan for 2 days until we flew back to New York. So I always remember that.
That's a funny story.
Did I answer all the questions?
Not all of them, but I did hear from a friend recently, which I did not discuss with you before this, that a brat diet is really good for any sort of upset stomach. So brat meaning bananas, rice, apples or applesauce, like you mentioned, and toast. Great at settling the stomach. So keep that in mind when you're on any ship. If you see those, definitely stick to some of those foods. Final question actually is, I have my experience of flying and I don't necessarily get motion sickness while flying, but do I
Mhm.
enjoy looking out the windows and do I enjoy really long flights? No. So I will take Dramamine to help myself sleep and just calm myself down a little bit. Is there something equivalent to that for ships, or is there any other medication that we may not know about that would be great for something like that, motion or seasickness?
Yeah, so the ships have an equivalent to Dramamine available at the guest services if you ask for it. They have it for free. There's another over the counter Bonine, which is very similar to Dramamine, and then there's something called the patch. It goes on your, I believe it goes behind your ear over here on the bottom, and it's some sort of medicine that it does something for you. I've never used it. I've heard good and bad things, but it's something that if Samantha goes on our first to go on a cruise and she sees people with this little, it looks like a Band-Aid behind there. It's people wearing the patch to kind of has medication in there for seasickness. And if you also see people that are flying, they have this like kind of like these gray wristbands that kind of go over your hand over here. It supposedly helps out for you. I've used them before, no luck. Uh, as I mentioned again, I suffer from severe seasickness, so I can get seasick very easily. But I'm happy to report that trying the certain remedies that I'm kind of suggesting here kind of make it a little bit more comfortable, right? Some people can go through 20, 25-foot seas and the ship sailing at 18 knots and they're literally in the dining room, but they're the only people in the dining room, right? So some people are built to take it more than others. Some people, don't get motion sickness and other people do. But there's ways to kind of cope with it, and I think those are good remedies. Also, right before I left on the last cruise, I bought a ginger tablets. They're like sort of like a gum that you chew, and it kind of injects ginger into you. And ginger is really very helpful before you maybe start popping bonines and dramamines and all those things. And it worked very well. I was fine. And I think if you kind of follow the steps that we've kind of outlined in this a quick clip, be careful where you book your cabin. Don't book forward. Don't book aft. Pay attention to the itineraries that you book. And that, I think, will set you up for success to have a great, comfortable first cruise. But just remember, right? Cruise ships are floating hotels, right? They have engines, right? And they're very susceptible to the weather, right? So the weather is, they're changeable, right? But cruise lines do the best to basically steer clear of storms. But obviously, there's remnants of that left over. So if a ship is not going to go into a hurricane, they're not. But there's going to be leftover remnants of that, which will lead to a rougher sea state, and that will be sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but it doesn't last forever. They usually smooth out after a certain period of time.
Well, thank you for your insight. That's good to hear. Anybody who has seasickness, definitely follow all these tips and tricks, because Jonathan is an avid cruiser over here. He has been on how many cruises again?
54.
Oh, I was going to say 58. I'm glad you corrected
Not
me
yet.
before I said anything. But he has been on 54 cruises, so he knows the best out of anybody. Stay tuned for more tips and tricks. But if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with all your friends, especially those who do get seasick. And we'll see you in the next episode of On Board with Jonathan.
Bye for now.